Post-World War II, under the lead of Western powers, countries around the world worked together to reduce trade barriers for the maximum benefits through trade. The General Agreements on Trade and Tariffs, originated in 1948, was an organized and effective move towards a more coherent world. At the time, due to the Cold War, tensions between the countries remained high. While President Johnson and Soviet Premier Khrushchev announced to cut back funds for nuclear weapons, China's successful nuclear test declared the fifth nation in the world with nuclear capability. In 1964, the fifth round of the GATT conference, which was named the Kennedy Round after the assassinated U.S. President John F. Kennedy, was launched in Geneva, Switzerland. Breaking Trade Barriers, General Agreements on Trade and Tariffs, Kennedy Round. Starting off on May 4, 1964, negotiators from 62 countries across the world met in Geneva, doubling the participants of the first round. The main purpose of this round was to pin down some agreements between Europe and the U.S. The Treaty of Rome, signed in 1957, removed trade barriers within Europe. Throughout President Kennedy's career, he paid a lot of attention to the economy and international trade. Fearing losing the European markets, the U.S. passed the Trade Expansion Act, which decreased duties for up to 50%. After the passage of this act, the houses pressed for a multinational conference to improve relations between countries and provide fair opportunity to every country by making adjustments to the terms established years ago. The Bridge Club, consisting of the U.S., UK, Japan, and European Economic Community, had the most say in policy changes and tariff cuts.
Let me say that the failure of these negotiations don't at all mean the failure of the trade negotiations. This is a tactical move right now.
While the previous rounds of GATT mainly focused on policy regarding industrial products, the Kennedy round pays attention to agricultural products as well. Due to the different climate and demographic in each country, some have natural advantage over others in agriculture. For example, the US is about 40 times bigger than the UK and has much more rich soil farmlands. However, with the technological revolution, France is producing 4 times the crops they need and faces a problem of what they are going to do with the excess crops. In addition, the global market for industrial and agricultural products are not unified, resulting in unfair competition for a number of suppliers. The common market, or agreeing to support each other, cannot agree on a community-supporting price for the products. While the EEC attempted to solve this issue before the conference, Germany refused to cooperate concerning their 1965 election. Former President of France, Charles de Gaulle, pressed for a unified policy for the EEC agriculture after realizing that Germany's agriculture industry is a key factor to the success of the Union. De Gaulle believed that only after they figure out their own business could they be a strong enough force to negotiate with other nations, especially the United States. Along with this, France also wanted to reduce tariffs on industrial products. However, everyone knew that it is going to be a rough time. To begin with, the countries could not work out a compromise on how to deal with the imbalance in trade. Some countries in the conference are more developed and have absolute advantage in trade over others, resulting in not only the unwelcoming atmosphere for developing countries, but also tensions within the Bridge Club. There were also a list of products and materials of which the party do not wish to be included in the negotiations. The lesser developed countries, mainly in Asia and Africa, were not in favor of the idea of free trade. This is, again, because they do not benefit from free trade. They want to export at a higher price than the equilibrium price, so they would not be losing. As shown in the graph, the less developed country Y, would only be able to sell the product at a much higher price and lower quantity, putting them as not competitive in the global market. Moreover, the communist propaganda and other extreme left ideologies see markets controlled by supply and demand as unfair and would only benefit the developed countries and make them richer. despite the efforts made by GATT in favor of the lesser developed countries. Thus, if this problem isn't resolved accordingly, the reputation of GATT may fall even more in countries controlled by extreme left ideologies. In late 1965, the negotiations for the hardest problem in the round began. The United States offered to treat agricultural products same as industrial ones. For example, the ones which were entitled normal tariff would be eligible for the linear cut, and the tariff for the other ones would have non-fixed cuts which were equivalent to a linear cut. However, the EEC, representing major European powers, wanted complex rules over agricultural products, including having a set amount of tariff a country can impose on its imports in total. Many, including the US, refused to take the EEC's proposal because then it would not be free trade. The EEC also had internal problems. Once after a meeting, France set a boycott for 6 months on the community institutions, which really took away the EEC's power in the negotiations. Serious negotiations resumed in 1966 after the EEC resolved its internal problems. As mentioned before, different environments and cultures different countries have put them in different situations while coming to a decision of how much they will cut their tariffs. Thus, disagreements occurred between the parties, partially due to the difference. The EEC still wanted the countries to have about the same tariffs despite the fact that this idea was put down a few times. For example, the EEC, seeing the US's enormous tariff amount, said that the US should do an at least 50% linear cut, and the countries with lower tariffs already would cut their tariffs by less than 25%. The US, of course, sees nothing right about this proposal, and consider this an act of the EEC to avoid high tariff cuts for themselves. Endless debate went on. They were nowhere close to even drafting a rule. After more than 3 years of work and negotiations, the Kennedy Round Conference ended on June 30th, 1967. Along with decisions regarding the future of international trade, tariffs were greatly reduced, and the schedule of tariff concessions were set. The linear concept, indicating an agreed percentage reduction in tariffs and duties, was the main idea, for it can be rapid and effective across the world. Before the Kennedy Round, many attempts were made regarding linear cuts, but none of them was especially effective due to the lack of influence. Another economic union in Europe, the Benelux countries, pressed for actions along with France. However, according to Bernard Norwood, who was an advisor for US in Geneva at the time, plans were elaborated over several years in technical studies, involving experts from the United States and other countries, but were never adopted. The Kennedy Round, due to its success in resolving trade issues and disparities, was the most important round of GATT on global trade. The United States alone reduced tariffs on over $7 billion worth of goods. More than 64% of the non-agricultural products received an average of 35% linear cut. Other participants, such as the EEC, Japan, reduced tariffs on more than $8 billion worth of imports from the US. The concessions scheduled were also greater in depth and more detailed than that of the previous rounds. The duty reductions for the US was approximately 35%. Across the world, duties and tariffs were all-time low. The countries are working together to make a win-win situation for everyone. All in all, the Kennedy Round was also a great breakthrough in countries working together, breaking barriers between them.